Hey, Jamie, how you doing today? It's been good to speak with you over chat and get our list of Q&A things together. I'm real excited to have you here today to chat through some AI things in general. But yes, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the team. I'm sure most, if all, the participants know who you are, but might as well go ahead and say a word about yourself.
Cool. My name's Jamie. I co-founder of a company called FreelyGive, where we've specialized in native Drupal CRM for a while. As you mentioned, I got pretty obsessed with AI a couple of years ago. And so I've been heavily involved in Drupal AI, the AI module, the AI initiative, and talking about all things AI and open source.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us here today. One of my sort of icebreaker question here that I have for you today, your Drupal org bio mentions that you did a physics and philosophy degree, but massively prefer philosophy, and that you're an avid gamer, especially StarCraft. So maybe, I don't know if you want to talk about philosophy so much, but I'm curious, what draws you to StarCraft specifically, or what drew you to it? I don't know if you played it.
I love StarCraft.
Yeah. I'm always happy to talk
RPG.
Sorry, Jeff, if you could mute yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No worries.
I will hush. I will hush now.
Sorry. What was that,
Yes.
Jamie?
No, I'm always happy to talk about more philosophy as well. So that is very much a thing I got into, and it's why there's a lot of overlap between what I found exciting about philosophy and AI. But yeah, StarCraft, I mean, it's fallen off a little bit, but like when I got into it at university, it was a big obsession. I think it was particularly because of the depth it had in the competitive scene. So being a bit of a nerd, I was never that much into football, which is obviously known as soccer to Americans, and never really followed any of that kind of stuff. And in StarCraft, for the first time, I got to feel like the kind of excitement of having a team. I played Zerg, for everyone who likes StarCraft, and watching the Zerg play and watching a couple of people that I really liked. So I got really into the streamers as well, watching them play. And we would go to some of the StarCraft events, me and friends at university. I never got very good at it. I got really good. I got to Gold League. And I introduced it to a friend I was living with, who was he's a really good engineer, and he was into Drupal for a bit. It was a Drupal startup, then got into Ruby on Rails, then quit and had fun employment for 3 months, where he just spent every day trying to get better and better at StarCraft. Wrote a blog post about it, went off to Silicon Valley. Zerg spamming is what I was into. And then he's now working at Anthropic. So there was a kind of like a link to, he got really into AI as well. But a bunch of us did. And that feeling of, that weird feeling that people who are into sports get to, of being able to like meet someone and immediately have a conversation about the latest developments of who's beaten who and why and all the drama around it, was really exciting. So StarCraft was the big thing. Blizzard became a little bit evil and then died. And now part of Microsoft, and all of those things have fallen off. So it's a bit of a shame. I don't have quite the time for, I mean, I still game a lot, but not quite the time as I used to with real work and being a parent and things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is really interesting how those gaming communities really have brought a lot of folks together in different ways. And so, yeah, my husband is an avid gamer. I don't game as much myself these days. He's a little upset about Destiny kind of go by the wayside right now. That's his game that he's been playing for quite some time. So gaming community is changing along with everything else. So we'll say that.
One thing as well that's quite a fun intro of it, which is the game I got really into for a while. Got quite sick thing, but it's Dota 2. I got a Dota 2 chair. So I got really into StarCraft, then Dota 2. And StarCraft is where Google started with a lot of their AI stuff, where they tried to build things that could get better at StarCraft, build AI that could get better at StarCraft. And OpenAI's first thing was to start playing Dota. And so OpenAI, when they first hit the scene, and they were just a little charity, their big like sort of intro into the world was playing at a Dota event and training a team that could beat other humans. So there's a kind of a big overlap between my love of AI and where gaming started.
Yeah, I wonder if there's more of that than I even realized. You mentioned that one, but it would make sense that there's other games out there that they're pitting AI teams against human teams or something in the e-game space. Okay, so let's dig into some AI stuff. I would say I am interested primarily in having you here today to talk about AI evals. You've said that evaluations don't tend to excite people as much as cool agent demos, but if you wanted to do something useful or make money, they are the most important thing you can do with AI. You've been pushing for shared eval infrastructure for Drupal specifically. What does that look like and where does it stand right now? To be honest, I think I want to start with what is eval infrastructure for Drupal AI, and then lead into what does it look like and where does it stand right now?
Cool. So I'd say there's two ways of thinking about evals. And in the very early days of evals, we were working on using AI to help automate things. So it's nothing to do with agents. It's a very simple AI where you have an input and you have an output, but an eval would judge how good those inputs and outputs were. And really early on in the rail industry, we were doing a lot of CRM work there, and we were doing claims management. And we were trying to do lots of automation that was automated using that had deterministic automation systems like lookups or following certain rules to try and speed up this the speed that a human could evaluate a claim and approve it or not. And obviously, when LLMs hit, it became a no-brainer that this could be used. And what we did is we built something that could automate looking at a paper ticket that was uploaded and whether it was valid for a particular journey. But in order to prove it worked, what we were able to do is take like something like 100 claims that have been evaluated by humans and then check how good AI was compared to it. And we got to about 90% accuracy, and humans are about 95% accurate. And it's got a lot better, but we haven't managed to test it at scale yet. Lots of stuff to do with compliance. Even though it was sold, we still struggled with getting things through things like InfoSec and compliance for various reasons. The evals was really important because we could go into a sales call and be like, here's something we built and you can see it working. But also when we compare it to some real life evaluations, real life examples, it's 90% accurate. It does it 90% of the time, and humans can take over. And this is what humans are able to do. And so from the very beginning, whenever we've really made any money and sold AI stuff beyond what looks cool in a demo, we found it's always been eval and data driven. And there's been recent excitement around you could call it vibe coding, agentic coding. These kind of AI harnesses is a phrase that has been used. Things like Claude Code, Codex, etc. And what we found is something similar. So in this initiative called the AI Best Practices, that web chick Angie has been sort of flying back into Drupal a little bit since Chicago. Someone called George presented an eval architecture, and it's a very simple one where you're writing in just a simple JSON format a particular prompt, and then the expected output and specific other expectations you have, and then you just get AI to run the prompt and do something, and then you have another AI check it and how good it is. So it'll be like Claude Code checking itself, and the scripts to run this will be like little Python scripts, and it gives you some and I can show you in a bit, but it gives you these reports. But it's similar for when we're trying to do it for agentic coding in Drupal, trying to make sure that we've got some actual data to judge both how good the AI is, but also how good all of the structure you've got around it, the skills and everything you've got to make things better is compared to somebody else's version of this.
Maybe, I'm curious to know, how does this differ from context, like what we're doing with the context control center in Drupal right now?
So I think the context control center, there's a lot of overlap, but the context control center, one of the biggest goals is to provide, there's two goals of the context control center. One of them was to provide end users the place to provide context to agents that was like unique to your site. So you might have a site building agent that is built that is like standard and used across multiple sites. You might want context to provide it, like what is your purpose, your organization name, your organization structure. So when it's building sites, it knows how to do it. Evals, you could build evals for that. So evals would be for testing how good your overall system is at following those rules. So you might say, one example is in Drupal, we might have an agent that is optimizing conversion rate and trying to make a form more likely to convert. But when we actually tried this out, we found one website that was a big American telecoms company, and it had a contact us form. And AI, in our first pass, it gave loads of examples of how it could improve conversion rates for this form. But the more we looked at it, we realized it's quite unlikely that the person who made this form is really optimizing for conversion rates. Like a lot of the telecoms agencies are not wanting people to use that contact us form, because most of the time the people who use it are just kind of be angry, sending loads of messages, complaints. So a lot of the time, you need the goals of your organization that might not be publicly stated, because you don't want to tell everyone this is a contact us form that we kind of don't want you to use. But I think a lot of the time, same thing with customer services. There's some customer services where the goal is to provide a really good end user experience. And I think there's some customer services where the goal is to get people to not phone and to try and just give them like run around in circles. And so you kind of need somewhere to tell what the goal is, what you're trying to achieve. And that's context control center. That's one bit of it. The other is just providing, it's like an actual low-level system for providing that context to AI without flooding its context window. So we regularly found that if you need to do something like build a page in Canvas and you have 30 different components, there's a lot of information about those components. So you need to have AI know what those components are, and then it can go and find more information about them. Or the other agent it has is one of the Canvas agents that can write code components has some libraries it's allowed to use. So you need to provide it the libraries it's allowed to use, and then it can ask for more information. So that's one thing. But then we could build an eval for, well, how often does the agent that writes the JavaScript component actually use that library? So that would be an eval where you ask it to do something, and then the check is, does it use this library as opposed to something it's not supposed to use?
Okay, so it's like quality control on how it's behaving throughout the process of running a request that you might send to it or something to that effect. Okay, gotcha. So go ahead.
I was going to say, and the power of it is that if we're all going to collaborate on our skills and our work together, if we have actual data and quality control, if you have improvements, you have your own skills. I see Carlos is on the, we had a big conversation about this in New York, where he has his own way of doing the building, taking a WordPress site and creating it inside Drupal. What it means is that as we build up this library of evals, somebody who comes along with a slightly better collection of skills or improvements can submit it and prove it. Because right now, most people are evaluating how good their skills and their AI coding is based around personal vibes. So you've got these public evals that like OpenAI release, but the problem with these public evals is all the coding agents tend to train their agents to be really good at passing those evals. It's not necessarily your real life experiences. And so what this will help us do in the Drupal community is take a look at, like, Opus 4.8 just came out. I think 5.6 of code ChatGPT is about to come out. A new model can come out, and a new model can come out, and then you're able to like check according to these evals how good it is at actually doing the things you want it to do. And then when you improve it, another dev improves it, we can all see that, and then we can start sharing.
And just to kind of circle back on like where does it stand right now, I think in the link that I provided to Angie's post, there was also a link to an example of an eval on the AI best practices project. Is that where all of this sort of shared evals are has that been decided? That's the kind of source of truth for our shared infrastructure of evals?
Yeah, at the moment that is, yeah.
Okay. And where would you say that you feel like there's gaps, or where does it stand at the moment, as far as getting this shared infrastructure of evals?
Just to illustrate what I'm talking about, I thought I'd quickly show off what they look like, because it's quite simple. So we have here, this is where I'm not a developer, so you're going to maybe understand this better than me. But we have a prompt to generate a kernel test skeleton for a module called my module, only the class structure, no test methods yet. Expected output, a minimal kernel test skeleton with kernel test base, correct namespace, and run tests in separate processes attribute. And my understanding is a lot of the time Claude would fail to do this. Expectations include this attribute, generated PHP passes, L syntax check. So this is an eval. So like I said, very, very simple what it is. It is something that is, I mean, again, not simple to me, but it's just a human readable prompt, a human readable expected output. Then when you run it, you get something like this, where these are all the different evals that were set up. And you can see the first one, kernel test, functional test, setup fix, without a skill, Claude code. I think this was using Opus 4.6. It was able to do this, but with our harness, but it tended to fail on this one that I just showed you. However, with our harness, with our skills, and with all the tools we've got, this one now suddenly works 100% of the time. So, obviously, I think I agree. We still want, you still want a senior level dev to be reviewed the AI generated code, and that is a complication with scaling. But the solution this solves for us is we are finding that skills make things better. So if you without them, you'll regularly run into similar problems over and over and over again. And when you bring in the skills, it does solve them. But their whole infrastructure of skills they use, every developer has their own. Even in FreelyGive, we keep trying to do our WordPress to Drupal skill, but every single new dev ends up building their own one really quickly. And so this will hopefully show us that you can then create an eval. The eval should be something that every single good dev should be able to look at and go, yeah, that makes sense. If I know about how automated testing works, I know why I want that. And then you should be able to go, well, I like that eval, and I can see why your thing passes it and my thing didn't. Therefore, yours is good.
So yeah, maybe let's move on to, how could Bluefly or other dev shops, think about like getting involved here, about like building these evals, and how could, what ways could we incorporate this into improving delivery processes, that sort of thing. Where do you think it makes the most sense to use evals?
So I think the best thing is to start with getting AI best practices, downloading it and using it. George is working on these things at different levels. So we're trying to make it easier and easier to write evals and explore them. So we're trying to build it's like a documentation site, which will allow us to actually see all the evals and all the skills that we have. I wonder if I lovable AI.
There is a documentation site that you're looking for here.
Yeah, I was just going to. There's a Lovable project shared with me.
Gotcha.
There's still one. I went to lovable.com, which is a underwear website. So a very different thing that I'm glad I was not sharing my screen at the time. So I did not know lovable.dev. Very different. So yeah, so you can see this is something that this is like a prototype UI for it. This is Lovable. And you can see this would be all the skills that we have. And then let's say block create, you would have what the skill is that you can then read, the actual evals there. The idea is the results of them, and then a talk page for us to try and improve that skill. So we're kind of working on that. But right now, the best place would be to go to AI best practices, which is here, AI best practices, and start trying to use it to do anything. Try and use any of the skills that already exist, and then try and improve the evals that are there and just add to them. I think any amount of trying to get it to do anything. So our focus right now for FreelyGive is in the WordPress to Canvas or source migration thing. So, or Figma to Canvas, or Figma to Drupal. Like that's where our focus is in FreelyGive. But there's a bunch of other skills that we have in here. So if we look at the skills, you've got like accessibility ones, automated testing, expert corrections, GitLab. Particularly the automated testing one, we've seen people are very excited by. So could we really capture how to do automated testing in Drupal well? And you start doing interviews with various people, which are in the issue queues, of how to do them and the nuances and the complexities of like Drupal's specific way of doing it compared to everyone else, which we're trying to capture in skills and then test it. And the idea is you should be able to point it at a module or project and just increase its test coverage correctly. There's a lot of stuff there that we're doing to do with the DevOps, like having an installer that can set up Drupal for the first time, work with GitLab and Drupal.org correctly, work with the issues. So some stuff there. But any amount of just using it for your day-to-day work, the more people we get actually using this AI best practices and not trying to build their own thing, but trying to make somebody else's work well, I would say is the best place that you could do to help.
I noticed one of them is called Evaluate Kamoa's Work and Find Ways to Collaborate. So so it looks like that the group is heavily encouraging Carlos to get involved here as well, and or evaluate Carlos's work and incorporate that as well. So not sure if you saw that one, Carlos.
I know that one. Yeah, we're trying to get to. We have a two different point of views where the AI best practices wants to do skills for everything. I disagree with that because those skills will, whenever you put them, the front matter will be loaded. So if you lately have seen your Claude, most of you have noticed that Claude started saying, I dropped the front matter from 97 skills or 25 skills because they have a limit. I believe it's 2% of your context and be loaded. So yeah, no, I think the part that Angie liked the most is the guides that I've been generating, which are atomic guides for AI. And I'm adding, hopefully this week, a way that when it detects that there is not a guide, because the agent that generates it, I don't have to intervene anymore that much. So I'm thinking about, actually try to get any guide and doesn't exist to create it automatically, so it can be self-maintained. And I believe that reason Angie like my guides is because they're not based on Drupal documentation, but they're based on the code most than Drupal documentation.
Awesome. And yes, let's maybe open up to a couple questions. We might have one other question we can add at the end here before our 9 minutes here at the end of the hour, or at the end, the half hour that we have, Jamie, today. But Darren, please ask your question there.
Yeah, so if I have, if I work with DDev and VS Code, how would I incorporate these AI best practices? Do I need to add it to the project I'm working on, or is there some way I can use them separately from and just apply them to the project?
Who's your AI?
Yes. So there's a README that shows you how to use it. So you can do composer, require, etc. So you can have it so that whenever you build the project, it runs it. So you can put it into your composer, require part of your project rather than actually commit the skills. And it is a module, so it does sit inside. There's lots of ways in which we're going to approach this. The AI best practices one is quite simple. It's a module, but it has a couple of scripts that do things like build your Claude.md files, agent.md files, etc. And one thing I would love is we've got AI best practices that is going to be the single place, because the dream of AI best practices is not necessarily the optimum approach, but it's the easiest to get a really good approach. So Angie's taken the approach that and developers tend to not like this, but Angie's taken the approach of like, we're going to put everything all in one place. It's not going loads of options. She's eventually been persuaded that we're going to support like Claude and Codex, but what she really wants is a single line installer. You hit enter, and you're just good to go. And it's aimed at people who've done no vibe coding ever before, and they've got something that is quite good. And then what I'm finding is every single time a dev gets really into it, is they have all of these crazy customizations of what if you want this, what if you want this, what do you want this, and it ends up with a mess that is really hard to get to do anything again. Is what we kind of tend towards in the Drupal community. So we're really, Angie and I are really pushing not for this necessarily to be the best thing that some devs who are deep in the weeds will want the most of, but to be the best like starting goal thing. And then what we're trying to do is have a really good starting place, but actually we're going to want skills and approaches that are not in the base package that not everyone needs. So with Darren, like one thing I'd love to see is a Drupal Forge dev panel set of skills that requires this. Because, you know, whenever I'm starting something and I'm trying to get it to work with dev panel, the way I'm doing it is by getting it to look at an existing project, copy that folder and try out all itself. And like I found out, you know, there's a particular there's some of these scripts that look like they're the scripts that run every single time it starts for cron, but actually only this one specific script. We've done loads of testing, or only one specific script actually happens when you build it from. So now I can put that in a skill, and I can remember that. So it'd be really cool to have like a dev panel Drupal Forge version. That means I can take any GitHub or Drupal or Drupal CMS project I've got, use this skill, and just immediately it will work on everything that it needs for dev panel. So that for you, Darren, it's something I've been speaking to Salim about, but I'd really love to see that. And that probably wouldn't go inside AI best practices, but it would go alongside it. We have also decided DDev is our focus. So we're not supporting non-DDev related workflows. Because again, we want to try and it's going to work really well for this limited environment. Acquia Nebula have another approach they're taking, which we're working alongside with, where they're doing something similar, but it's razor focused on the site migration into Acquia source. So it is for Canvas, but specifically Canvas in source. And with Acquia Nebula, they've gone the approach of you don't need DDev, you just need Node. You don't install Drupal at all. You install this own thing called Canvas Workbench. And it's aimed at non-Drupal devs, like front-end devs who know nothing about Drupal, but they're really interesting coming from Figma into source. So they've taken like a slightly different approach where they're like, we don't need the complexity of DDev. We have currently gone for just assume DDev, assume a whole bunch of things, but make it work really well with those assumptions. And then what we're doing is we haven't quite got there yet, but we've created an install script that will allow you to create customizations. So you can create an install script, but point it at your similar to composer.json. So then FreelyGive can have its own version of AI best practices that it takes AI best practices as the default, but then offers a whole bunch of customizations, like maybe you don't want to use Docker, you want the other one, or maybe you want to bring in the DDev, the dev panel skill, or maybe FreelyGive prefers doing things in way X rather than way Y. So our idea is to have like a base thing, one install works for everyone, but then offer devs who don't agree with the base thing to optimize it and make it more specific. That's kind of our vision, and we're kind of there. We've got like proof of concepts of it working. Not enough that I'd be able to make videos on it though.
I'm trying to picture how I actually interact with this. Is there a admin page in a Drupal site for interacting with it, or is it on the command line, a drush command, or what? What is it?
Yeah, so it's all command line. So you literally go in and you type in these two things, right? And it will run. It will run the install, where it will set up the agents.md file, which will point to the skills directory, and then you do everything in Claude Code. So what will happen is when you're running Claude Code or Codex inside this folder, it will just, the idea is it will just those skills will be there, and when you're asking it to do things, it should hopefully use the skill correctly when it's asking to do it. So if you run these commands in your folder, then you ask it to do something that involves automated testing, it should pick up on this automatically.
So if I use the integrated Copilot panel in VS Code and I choose Claude as the model, it would automatically find these files?
So I know that we've got it working with Claude Code and Codex. I don't specifically know about how it works with VS Code.
It
Okay.
depends on what you have. I know Cloud Code use plugins, which I believe is a little bit bigger than Skills. And Cursor has some of these plugins. It has some sort of version of that, but I don't know about Codex. So it depends on what you have. Everybody has a Skills. Plugins, what they give extra is like more deterministic ways to ensure that the eval is checked or that things are done. But yeah, skills are everywhere. Agency skills is in all of them.
Yeah, so
But
we
depends on your AI.
This is how the skills .sh installer works. The universal ones is .agent skills. So all of these things, they should just work. Claude Code works. I don't know about VS Code, so it might be in that list. But generally
Code,
speaking, because we're doing AI best practices and we're trying to focus it on the kind of the standard way, if you want to use VS Code instead, then and
VS
Copilot,
Code connect to any of those, Jamie.
then you could go and ask. You could take a look at it in there.
And I think a major functionality, if I'm reading through this correctly, is that it will write, your MD files in order to guide any queries that you might be making against your project in general, right? I mean, it's not just skills, but it's also like instruction sets.
Yeah, it's skills instruction sets. I mean, there's some more to it. There's things to do with like how does it browse things. There's some other tooling behind it, so how it can check its work. And that's why whether or not it will just work with something like VS Code is somewhat complicated. Because sometimes these things deviate a little bit, but the heart of it should.
Well, thank you. We are at the top or the end of the meeting here today. I know you probably have something else to jump to today, Jamie. Thank you so much for joining us, and everyone else as well. We will be continuing with programming like this in the future. It'll probably be a different time of the week and or day. But thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week.